Thank you for taking some time to speak with us about this big issue regarding the primary election here locally in Framingham, about the Framingham Democratic Committee. Two groups are on the ballot for people who are registered Democrats, as well as unenrolled and independent voters who elect to have a Democratic ballot. Now, for people who may not be aware of this Group 1, Group 2 situation, Representative, could you give some background leading up to it and how it got to this point where there are two groups on the ballot for the FDC?
So first, every town or municipality has or is able to create a Democratic town committee in the same way they could create a Republican town committee or a Libertarian town committee. While Framingham is a city, the architects of the charter did not create it as a city in a more traditional format with wards. And so because of that, we're limited to 35 individuals. And for the last several decades, the local Democratic Party put together a joint slate, a unity slate with no controversy whatsoever that included all current active members of the committee. And then when there were openings, the invitations went out to associate members, members that are full members of the committee with the exception of not being able to vote on those very, very rare votes that are taken. And if still there were any openings, opened up to volunteers. This year, that was the assumption. The current co-chairs of the Democratic Town Committee, I say town committee because it's how it's organized, but the Democratic Local Committee, who had only been actually at this point chairs for about a year and a half, relatively new chairs, put together that same list, including the three names on the top of what became Group 2. They were held as placeholders. Cesar Stuart Morales did not hear back from two of the people. He did hear back from the third on the list, though, or the second, depending on how it's organized. But he did hear back from Adam Freudberg, who said, yes, I'd like to be a part of the slate. He had not heard back from Representative Souza or Mary Kate Feeney, but again, saved a space for him. Moved forward until, I think it was the last day of October, when I received a phone call, along with several others, that an alternative slate was being put together, actually inviting us and inviting me to be a part of that alternate slate. Depending on who called us, we were all given different information. I was told the slate was going to be more bipartisan in nature, which surprised me because it was a Democratic Party slate, and that it would include life members in order to fill out the slate to remove current members of the current committee that, for various reasons, members of what became Slate 2 had issues with. I immediately rejected the invitation and reached out to everyone I knew that was being connected to that slate, imploring them to come together to accept what we had always been working on, a unity slate, and that was rejected. The other two individuals never responded to Cesar Stuart Morales' invite to be a part of the slate, and instead, behind the scenes, put together an alternative slate. In the weeks that followed, we received phone calls. We didn't solicit them, but we received phone calls from folks who were invited to join Slate 2, confused about what they were being invited to do. Unfortunately, people were put in very, very difficult positions where they didn't want to have to pick. To hear one of the members, I have to work with people on both slates. Why am I being put in this position? And every time somebody called me, I told them to make whatever choice they thought best for them, that our relationship wouldn't change if they joined this Group 2, if they joined what became Group 1. A lot of folks actually stayed out of it entirely, didn't want to get involved in the battle between the slates. And unfortunately, there are some great folks who are not going to be a member of the committee. I think there have been several narratives that have come out of Group 2, and we have tried to stay very, very positive, but it's hard to counter false narratives and take the highest of high roads. One of them being that there aren't opportunities for new voices in the committee, which
as well, one of the things I was going to ask about. Yeah.
Simply not true. I joined about 10 years ago, and there was a place for me. After participating for a while, an opening presented itself, and I became a full member. I think in the last couple of years, we've added 7 new full members, maybe over a dozen associate members, folks that wanted to get involved. We're hearing that there are folks who don't feel comfortable joining, but they've never attended a meeting. Joining the committee it's not a popularity contest. You have to participate in local elections. The sole purpose of the committee is to elect Democrats. And you have to put in a certain number of hours each year into electing Democrats. And I firmly believe that if the architects of what became Group 2 really wanted to move the needle or to incorporate new voices, the time and place to do that was months ago when that slate was coming together. Ultimately, what became Group 1 has more new voices than Group 2, actually, because of the openings that presented themselves as folks left the unity slate to form Group 2. But there was a world where all of those folks that were interested could have been incorporated as full members, or for the newest of folks, as associate members. And then as people pass away, or move away, or step down, folks, as is always the case, who are associate members, who have learned the responsibilities of being members, could ascend to be full members.
So a lot of background leading into this. You and the 33 other members of Group 1, you addressed some of the claims from Group 2, but specifically for Group 1, if Group 1 is to come out on top in this primary, what are some of the key focuses of the groups in order to promote the party, which is ultimately the goal of a town committee, to promote the party in which they're representing? What are some of the things that your group is standing on as a platform during this race?
So this comes down to some of the discussion that's been going on online. As you said, the pure purpose of the committee is to elect Democrats. And so if you look at Group 2 or Group 1, you're going to see folks that travel up to New Hampshire on a regular basis who were just up there for the Democratic primary. You're going to see folks, I lead groups of local volunteers to help re-elect Democratic colleagues in places like Leominster and Attleboro. You see folks that have knocked on doors locally for candidates as well. It's an eclectic group that doesn't agree on everything all the time. But the Democratic Town Committee, or the local committee, it isn't city council. Yes, it takes positions on local issues, it takes positions on legislation, constantly working to advance things like a woman's right to choose, LGBT rights, immigrant rights, healthcare, the issues that are affecting all of our families. But again, the purpose being to elect Democrats to continue to advocate for those things. And I'm confident when this committee is elected or re-elected that the incumbent slate, which again is Group 1, is going to continue doing that work. And I've been impressed over the last couple months of the number of folks locally who have taken the lead on things like a woman's right to choose, or gun violence, or the environment. They've actually started attending meetings on a very regular basis, and we've added several new associate members just in the last couple months, folks that, weren't willing or able to take a position on Group 1 or Group 2, but decided to actually come to their first meeting and then come to their second meeting and become more involved in the committee, because there's a lot being said about the dynamics of the group, but as somebody who is relatively new myself, I have not found those to be rooted in fact.
Whether it's you or anybody else involved in Group 1, with it being such a massive year on the national stage and the state stage for both the Democratic and Republican parties, are there any specific strategies that the FDC's Group 1 might have going into such a big election season in the fall?
So the folks on Group 1 know how to run campaigns and know how to win campaigns, and so those same strategies will be employed. It's very unfortunate. All of us wish that we could be spending time right now going to New Hampshire, getting ready for the presidential election, where it could all come down to New Hampshire, making sure that Democrats, not only in Massachusetts but in surrounding towns, get elected. And we can think back to the current majority in the Senate, the U.S. Senate. It's a one Democrat majority. It takes the entire Commonwealth and surrounding states to make that happen, and that's just going to continue. May 5th is going to come. It's going to then pass, and those same group of volunteers is going to continue the hard work. Unfortunately, we're having to employ those skills to get ourselves reelected, but come May 6th, we're going to be using those same skills to get Democrats locally, but statewide and nationally elected as well.
Now, you mentioned the idea that Group 2 has contended that new voices are not being provided a proper platform. We've already addressed that. One of the other major points that Group 2 is looking to drive home is that I'm just looking at the specific phrasing, sticking with a status quo. They contend that Group 1 is stuck in a status quo. What would your response to that claim be?
So if you look at the names on the ballot, there are folks that have been involved for over a decade, and there are folks like our current co-chairs who have only been the co-chairs for 18 months. it seems like just yesterday people were asking who's Jack Lewis, and now I'm being accused of being the status quo, even though I've only been in the legislature for 7 years. If you look at Group 2, you'll see familiar names like John Stefanini, who before running for mayor and before serving on the city council was the state rep decades ago. You see folks like Jerry Desolate, who not only used to be the town moderator, but was the chair of the Democratic Town Committee, actually, 7, 8 years ago when I first joined. You see folks like Adam Freudberg, who was the vice chair of the Democratic Town Committee when I first joined. And so to accuse one group of being the status quo while claiming that the other group is full of new voices, again, just isn't rooted in reality. Both groups have new folks that have recently gotten involved, and both groups have folks who have been involved for, in the case of Group 2, we have no life members, and so we don't have any folks who've been involved for 20 years. Why Group 2 has included those folks, separate conversation. But to be accused of being a part of the status quo when our leadership is new, we have more new members on our slate than Group 2, and Group 2 is filled with folks who have been very involved in Framingham government, including George King, who was the former town manager decades back. Just doesn't quite add up. It's I think, a narrative that's easy to say, but anyone who looks at the ballot realizes that there's much more going on.
Now, when people step up to the ballot on primary day or in early voting, whenever it might be, what's the one thing you would want them to take if they have the Democratic ballot in front of them in Framingham? What's the one thing you would want them to think of when they're making this choice?
So folks have the opportunity to fill in up to 35 ovals.
Yeah, and mix and match it.
You can mix and match. I just hope people remember that it didn't have to be this way, that up until, I think, October 31st, when we learned of this effort underway, there would have been one group of names that no one would have thought as controversial, and that anyone who didn't make it because they hadn't attended a meeting before could have joined as associate members within a couple months. There are great folks on both lists. There are people who are very active in not only the city, but Democratic politics. But I implore folks just to fill in the Group 1 oval, because those are the folks that really have tried to bring together the party, who have been doing the work. And I hope come May 6th, we can begin the healing that always happens after a primary, or in this case as well. I first ran, it's interesting, we're coming up on my re-election, and I was just reflecting the other day. I ran 8 years ago. I've been in the House for 7 years. When I ran, I'd only been a part of the Democratic Local Committee for about a year or two. And when I ran, of the 35 members, fewer than a handful, I actually was trying to count this morning, it might have only been even fewer than that, maybe 2 or 3, supported me. There were other great Democrats running. What happens in Democratic primaries is people pick sides, they pick teams, and then ideally they come back together. But I didn't let that discourage me. I kept coming to meetings, even though I knew that the room was filled with folks that supported people I was running against. Fortunately for me, I won, but then I started repairing some of those relationships. During a campaign, you hear rumors of things being said, and it can be discouraging. It can, as a candidate myself, it can be difficult to want to build that bridge at least halfway to meet people after some of the things you hear said about you. But I think successful electeds put that behind them. They mend fences, and I hope folks continue to come to meetings, because one of the things we've heard is that Group 2 didn't feel supported by the majority of members when they ran. Some of them ran for office in the past, which again isn't very accurate in every case. But I hope folks continue to come to meetings. The folks in Group 2 that have never been to a meeting, please come, regardless of how the election turns out. The folks in Group 2 who are already members of the committee but haven't been to a meeting in months or years, please come back, because things are different. They're constantly changing with all of these new members and really a new leadership team that has taken us in a different, more productive direction. The door is open, and for folks that know me, you'll have a familiar face looking across the table. If things don't make sense, or you're wondering, am I sitting in a room of somebody else's Thanksgiving dinner? That's how I often described it when I first came. I was like, I don't know any of these people. What are they talking about? But then I just kept coming back. And you may love it. You may think it's something that needs to be a part of your monthly calendar. You may decide that you're better knocking on doors and not coming to a planning meeting once a month, and then that's okay. But get involved and let me know if there's a way you want to get involved, if it's the committee or if it's legislative work. There's many of us that want to connect you.
While we still have you here, Representative, is there anything else you want to add?
I just want to thank you for inviting us in to have these conversations. I think my integrity has been questioned a little bit as I tried to clarify the narrative, to clarify what actually happened. And I think folks that know me, who have worked with me, have never questioned my integrity. And so I just hope folks in Framingham ask themselves as they try to make sense of what's going on, who are we? And I'm confident that in the end, we're going to come together as a local party and get back to the actual work of being Democrats, electing Democrats that are pro-choice, that are fighting against climate change, that are working to expand human rights. That's what this is all about. And soon and very soon, this will be behind us.
Representative Liu, again, thank you very much. We appreciate the time that you took out of your day to speak with us on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.